Okay, let's begin now. This webinar is originating from the City of Vancouver, which is founded on the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. Some speakers will be presenting from other locations today, and we respectfully acknowledge those traditional territories. Hello, my name is Sophie King. I am the Manager of Professional Learning at PIBC, and I'm very happy to welcome you to PIBC's 7th Peer Learning Network webinar, The Cold Hard Truths About Housing Development and the Art of the Possible. Kind of sounds like a planning thesis, doesn't it? We have had a tremendous interest in this webinar with over 500 registrations. Nearly 30% of these are from non-PIBC members, which is fantastic because one of the core principles of the Peer Learning Network is to deliver services to both planners and non-planning professionals working in the housing space. So we thank all of you for being part of the Peer Learning Network and this webinar. A few words about the Peer Learning Network. PIBC continues to deliver the Peer Learning Network through to the rest of 2025. We are working with the PIBC Housing Task Force to develop and scope out a number of research projects. Please stay tuned for more information in the next couple of months. PIBC will also continue to deliver webinars. Some upcoming webinar topics may include visualization and decision support tools to support housing policymakers and practitioners, as well as given the positive response to this webinar, we will likely hold a second webinar about the development economics of housing over the coming months. And finally, if you are planning to attend the PIBC annual conference in June, please be sure to join the PLN session scheduled for June the 12th at 1 p.m. So write that down. We are planning to have an exciting panel of planners and development practitioners to share their on-the-ground perspectives about the provincial housing legislation, what's working and what needs further improvement. Please check the PIBC website for other offerings. For example, through the PLN, PIBC is offering financial support for practitioners to host hyperlocal events in your community related to housing, and this would be done via the Peer Pod program. The online discussion forum is also another place to share information and perspectives about housing. Okay, so now on to our program. Our speakers today is Jay Wollenberg, R.J. Wollenberg, Wollenberg Monroe Consulting, Annelise Veen of Purpose Driven Development, Michael Mortensen with Liveable City Planning, and I would also like to welcome Alison Espetveidt with Lidstone and Company, who has participated in several PLN webinars and who will be answering the legal questions, especially during our Q&A. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for listening. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording and the slide presentation will be available on the PIBC website shortly after the webinar, so check back. As well, after all the speakers are done presenting, we will move on to the Q&A portion of our program, answering the questions that were pre-submitted by you at the time of registration. We will not be answering any new questions via the chat window. And now I would like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Jay Wollenberg of Wollenberg Monroe Consulting. Hello, Jay. I will bring your presentation up.
Thanks, Sophie.
Welcome.
Ready to launch?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. 15 minutes to cover a lot of territory, so buckle up. I've been asked to provide a commentary on the blizzard of legislation that deals with amenities, infrastructure, and affordable housing, and what some of the new opportunities and challenges, or in Ray Khan's words, the cold hard truths. Here's what we're going to cover. A really high-level overview of the new legislative framework for planning for housing, focus on the changes to funding infrastructure, amenities, and affordable housing. Look at some of the possible impacts and some of the implementation challenges that are associated with these. A reminder of why the province did this. This is their set of objectives. Faster creation of housing by ensuring more land supply, reduce reliance on site-by-site rezonings and negotiations to speed up projects and reduce risk, make municipal charges more predictable, and increase density, especially in transit areas. I guess it remains to be seen how much they'll achieve these objectives, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So this new legislative framework, this is a very high-level overview of key elements. As most of you know who are municipal planners, you now have to do housing needs reports with a 5 and 20-year outlook for housing. Your OCP has to be updated by the end of this year to designate at least 20 years of housing land and include the transit-oriented areas in those designations. Also, by the end of the year, you got to revamp your zoning bylaws to have a minimum of 20 years of zoned housing land. You're going to have to incorporate the minimum allowable densities in transit-oriented areas. And of course, there's a small-scale multi-unit housing that you have to respond to in your bylaws. And where we're going to focus today, the new context includes changes to development cost charges, the introduction of amenity cost charges, a new zoning tool called inclusionary zoning for affordable or special needs housing, and of course some changes to density bonusing. There's a simple but very powerful urban land economics tool that can be used to test the impacts of changes. It's called residual land analysis, and it kind of works like this. In urban areas, most potential development sites have two candidates for what's going to produce the market value. It's either the value supported by what's going on now, the existing use. It might be a row of single detached houses, might be an older commercial or rental residential property. And the question is, what would an owner-occupier or an investor pay to retain that use? Alternatively, what's it worth to a developer? What's the most a developer can pay to buy the site, demolish, and redevelopment? Obviously, for redevelopment to be viable, the developer's got to be able to pay more than the value supported by the existing use. Now, there's a graph, not a detailed pro forma analysis, but a graph just to illustrate the point. Let's suppose that this existing use has a value of 10 million bucks based on commercial rents, if it's a rental property, or the value of houses, if it's an assembly of single family properties. That's what an investor or an occupier is willing to pay for this property just to keep it doing what it's doing. Now let's look at how a developer might look at it in a base case here before we start tinkering with it. You can see up here, it's $100 million project. You can make up, if you want, how that works. Maybe it's 150 units at about 750,000 each. More value, less units in a higher value market. Where does the 100 million bucks go? The developer needs to strip off, in this case, about 12 million for profit. There's an allowance here for 73 million, which is all in, all possible project costs. And that leaves at most $15 million that this developer can pay for land. That's a good thing in this case. That $15 million is more than the $10 million that's supported by the existing use. So this is probably a development site. Now let's mess with it. First, revenue falls. This is now a $95 million project. Where did the money go? Well, it might be market conditions. Unit prices went down because of soft market, or it might be because somebody imposed an affordable housing requirement on the project and there's less revenue. Also, what happened is costs went up $79 million instead of 73. Why? Well, it might be an external factor like construction costs or interest rates, but it could be because the local government jacked DCCs and ACCs. Combination of less revenue and bigger cost means this developer now can pay at most $5 million for this project, or it's not viable. Now we got a bad news story. It's worth $10 million staying the way it is, and a developer can't match or beat that number. How do we fix that problem if the costs are higher? Well, one way to fix it is to try and get the revenues up. Maybe that's more density. Maybe it's less affordable housing as part of that greater density. But in this case, you see the costs are still higher, but we've made the revenues higher. This is back to $15 million. So we've got a possible development site. The implications of that there are outcomes to changes in zoning and local government costs that affect how much housing supply is going to be created. Developers can't just arbitrarily jack prices significantly above market value to offset increased costs. And so if the value is for redevelopment is higher than the existing use, there's room for amenities, infrastructure, affordable housing. But if the increased cost means that the value falls, then redevelopment's not feasible. We might be able to offset that by increased density depending on market conditions, but if not, we could have widespread reduced viability of new development. Less supply means housing prices go up, and all housing prices, not just the stuff that's being built now. That's a key cold hard truth. If you reduce the flow of supply in a high demand market, all housing prices are going to rise. Now let's look at some of these legislative changes. It's great that DCCs now cover things like police, fire, solid waste, recycling, and amenity cost charges can cover things like library and daycare. And they can be levied on all development, not just increased density at rezoning. But unless those are carefully calibrated, costs get too high for redevelopment to be viable. It's better to get a little money from a lot of projects than a lot of money from no project. Inclusionary zoning. The legislation calls this affordable and special needs housing. You can now, as a local government, require new projects to include affordable or special needs units. If you do this, you've got to set requirements for 10-year prices, rents, and time frame, and you could set requirements for what share of units, who owns them, who manages them, what type of units they are, and you can add density. You've got to have consultation and a feasibility analysis. You're allowed to do cash in lieu, but it's at the developer's option. Units can be provided elsewhere by agreement, and the challenge here is that they can decrease revenue and increase cost by forcing the inclusion of affordable units. So you might end up accidentally making projects not viable. Density bonusing has also changed. You know, with density bonusing, there's an outright base density, but you can add extra in exchange for a defined public benefit. There's been lots of changes to this. You now have to do consultation and financial feasibility analysis, establish reserve funds, do annual reporting. Here's a key issue. You can't include conditional density in the 20-year capacity calculation for your zoning. And while on an interim basis, you can use this, you can use density bonusing inside the minimum envelope for a transit-oriented area, that's going to disappear soon, and you won't be able to use it. Also, cash in lieu, but now only at the developer's option, not yours. You can agree to provide the units elsewhere by an agreement. Similarly with inclusionary zoning, you've got to impose conditions about the share of space, prices, rents, and you may include provisions for ownership and management. For density bonusing to work, at least 3 conditions have to be true. The developer's got to want the density. You say, why wouldn't a developer want more density? Well, if it kicks a project over from wood frame to concrete in order to use the density, it might not work. Maybe the extra density kicks the project up to a scale the developer isn't really able to take on within their financial resources. So developers got to want it. It's got to make money, obviously. And the value of the extra density has got to be greater than the cost of the required public benefit. Why would a developer choose to use it? If those conditions aren't true, then this is not a viable method for achieving either affordable housing, amenities, or infrastructure. So these new tools come with some risks, some cold hard truths. They increase cost, In the case of inclusionary zoning, they can also reduce revenue. This can impair the viability of redevelopment, which has bad impacts on the housing market. It's possible that extra density might offset the impacts if the density in your marketplace at this time has value. But if not, you might have to adjust your requirements for development cost charges, ACCs, or inclusionary zoning. There are some interesting implementation challenges. It's good, I suppose, that DCCs and ACCs can be applied to all development, even when density is not increasing, but that does create a risk of impaired viability. You have to consider whether your ACC rates are going to need to include site acquisition, because with fewer site-by-site rezonings, you might have less opportunity to secure property as part of a rezoning approval. You might have to buy the site to put the daycare or the library on, and you better be very, very careful about setting the costs in these. Inclusionary zoning and density bonus, good opportunities for affordable housing. Keep in mind, density bonusing is completely at the discretion of the developer to use, but inclusionary zoning is mandatory. If you use density bonusing for affordable housing, obviously the ability to use it for amenities will be reduced. And as discussed, it's possible that the extra charges or decreased revenue impair viability. You can use cash in lieu, but it's only at the developer's option. For amenities, that might limit the ability to pool funds for a community amenity. Also, there's a new requirement that the cash in lieu has got to be equivalent to the capital cost otherwise incurred. That might be easy to figure out for what would have been an on-site amenity. It'll be tricky to figure out if the developer's providing residential units that are affordable, but the developer retains ownership because they have value as well as a cost. This is a particular concern of mine on large redevelopment properties now. If they're pre-zoned to help you meet the 20-year requirement for housing, you'll have a reduced ability to negotiate on-site requirements for amenities or obtain sites for public use. If they're pre-zoned with density bonusing to help secure amenities or sites, keep in mind you can't include the conditional density in your 20-year capacity. And the minimum density envelope in TOAs may limit the ability to bonus for higher density, especially in places where concrete construction isn't viable. So some conclusions: these new tools create some great new opportunities for funding infrastructure, amenities, and affordable housing, but there are risks. Cold, hard truth. An increased supply of zoned land is a good thing, if that's been a constraint on housing development in your area, but it only helps if the development is financially feasible. You've got to do market-specific analysis of viability to use these new tools. And if you look at it closely and you discover that the combination of what you're looking for DCCs, ACCs, and inclusionary zoning are too expensive for viability, you're going to have to explore alternatives. Can you accept less infrastructure, amenity, or affordable housing? Can you use additional density in your location to help offset the cost? Do you need to look at reducing land cost by making public or nonprofit sector lands available? Can you reduce profit? Not for the private sector. They need a minimum profit to want to be in this business. So this is only possible for public or nonprofit projects. And lastly, there's a lot of talk about this now. Can we shift the costs to somewhere else other than the development project? One way or another, that means taxes, whether it's income taxes or property taxes. Here's the real cold hard truth. If we can't use DCCs, ACCs, and inclusionary zoning to get the things we need because the load is too heavy for projects to bear, we're going to have to figure out other ways to pay for some of this stuff. Thank you.
Well done, Jay. Exactly 15 minutes. You must have been practicing.
Only for 50 years.
Thank you for the information. So much to unpack here, and we will go back to it during the Q&A. So now I would like to invite the next speaker, Annelise van der Veen of Purpose Driven Development. Hi, Annelise.
Hi, Sophie.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm just noticing, I don't know if it's just on my screen, but the Oh, yeah, there we go. Presentation was a bit. Thanks so much. I appreciate everyone tuning in today. My focus is going to be kind of pulling back a little bit to look at the non-market housing sector. I was asked to provide a case study of non-market housing, which I will do, but I also wanted to ensure I touched on a few of the questions that were submitted and some of the curiosities around what it takes to make affordable and non-market housing development possible, and the role that municipalities and policy play on the non-market sector's ability to deliver housing. So I bring a few hats to the conversation today. I have a background in planning, but I've been working in the development industry, and I am currently our in-house financing expert at Copenhagen Development. So I support financing for all of the projects in all stages of development. Purpose-driven development is a real estate development consulting firm. So we primarily work with nonprofits and organizations who own group ownership and don't necessarily have that expertise for the financing in place to deliver the development projects they want to see on that land. We bring expertise in delivering mixed use and mixed income developments with a goal to create inclusive prosperity throughout our work. Yeah, so turning back to what's possible across the non-market housing sector, it used to be that across the sector, a lot of non-market housing projects were delivered with huge funding injections in the form of subsidies from the government. And there has been a shift in recent years away from this heavy subsidy model in non-market housing to explore alternative options to delivering these homes, which is the mixed income model. This is when you provide new homes at different levels of affordability within the same building in order to create long-term financial sustainability for the projects. In this approach, we work with clients who bring land, but don't typically have much money to put towards the project. And we work creatively with a range of key levers, which I'm going to run through shortly, including working closely with municipalities to bring a viable project forward to lenders. So these are the 5 critical levers of non-market housing: nonprofit ownership, land, policy, cross-subsidization, and financing. And I'll say this a few times, but it's critical that all levers need to be in place to successfully achieve financial viability for these projects. The nonprofit ownership lever is key. Most of our clients are nonprofits or organizations who have land through group ownership. And these groups are typically looking to deliver on a range of social priorities, including affordability, sustainability targets, and any other key priorities that might be unique to each organization. What is common across all of these groups is that they're not seeking a profit from their projects, which means that the total project cost from the start is reduced. We're thinking about those starts that were just shared by Jay. And then cost savings that are realized at any point during the project process through value engineering or through discussions with municipalities around leniency and policies are able to be reinvested back into the project, since the goal is typically delivering affordability. And this also helps us secure favorable terms and support from lenders who are looking to provide those to groups with aligned purposes delivering projects. Land lever. So as again, we just saw, land is key to successful projects, especially in the non-market sector. So the majority of nonprofits advancing developments bring the land into their project, which means, again, reduce project costs from the start. And land also is the basis by which we are able to leverage and secure financing for the project. The policy lever is critically important as well to deliver non-market housing. And this policy may play a significant role in making these projects work, with the ability to secure leniency in a range of forms from municipal policy. So this might include density bonusing, significant fee waivers through DCC and CAC fee waivers, expedited approvals, and other things such as parking reductions, which enable us to put more of the project's budget and cost into the affordability or into the housing component rather than into parking. And there are other policy exemptions that might be specific to each project and each specific municipal context that can help non-market, nonprofit projects achieve viability. A good example of this is that I'll talk about later as well with the case study is the City of Vancouver has an incentive program dedicated for social housing. And social housing is achieving a certain level of affordability within a building, but it's also owned by a nonprofit. And so they offer expedited approvals and fee waivers to those projects. And this was a long way in helping projects achieve viability. Cross-subsidization is a key part of the mixed income model, and we implement approaches from early on in the start of projects to explore what that mix of rents across a building can look like and what the different options might be from the start with potential lending programs in mind. So we typically carry a few options to ensure we can maintain some flexibility within the project and continue to test this through the project until we secure the financing required and to deliver the project in full. And this really helps weather changes in interest rates and financing terms and any changes to policy at all levels of government. Least is the financing lever. So we try to take a creative approach to financial viability by bringing a range of lenders around the table early on in projects. So we understand what their requirements are, what they're looking for, what they're looking to support. And we typically stack different lending programs together. And these groups also can bring grants to projects to deepen the affordability of homes. Because of this happens really because of that aligned to the value and purpose that these are looking to. So again, I'll just reiterate that it is critical that all of these 5 levels are in place to be able to be pulled at any point for a non-market, nonprofit and housing project. If any one of these levers is missing, the financial viability of the project, which is already really a balancing act throughout the course of the project, can fall apart. And so I want to share just a couple examples of what this has looked like in practice. So I'll start with Seropolis House. This is a nonprofit owned project in the city at Canada 13th. It has a unique vision that's delivering housing for women by a team of women across the design, development, and engineering industries. And their target population for this building is for provide affordable housing for senior women, women-led families, and workforce women. All women project team who are leaders and professionals in their industries coming together to deliver this project, but also to build capacity for mentorship of junior team members within their companies. Project has delivered 145 new rental homes at various rent levels, and we actually were able to achieve 100% below market rental housing in this specific project. It's about 13 stories, concrete structure, and has a range of indoor and outdoor amenity spaces throughout the building to really create that sense of community among residents. So that there's a shared rooftop patio, which is adjacent to an indoor amenity space on the 13th floor, which is open and available for all residents to use as they'd like. There's also a shared laundry room directly adjacent to an outdoor amenity space on the ground floor, and a large empty living room. This project is a great example of what we were able to achieve through the City of Vancouver's expedited approvals process. And I understand that other municipalities across the province also have similar programs to expedite non-market housing development. We were able to achieve a rezoning in 7.5 months in the city of Vancouver, which is almost unheard of. We were also able to secure municipal and regional fee waivers of about $3 million. Structure for this project, which project cost was $83 million, included a range of funders and lenders. So we brought quite a mix of lenders to the table and were able to stack the financing to make this project financially viable for the short and long term, and also to achieve relatively deep levels of affordability for this building. And the second project I wanted to touch on is Southland Place. So this project is a transatlantic large-scale social housing development, also within the city of Vancouver. It's owned by a nonprofit organization, and it's near Canby Onion Drive on a 2-acre large site. The target population for this building was set up by the nonprofit to be intergenerational, so considering seniors, families, students, young adults, and newcomers. And because it's adjacent, so about a block away from the SkyTrain, it's also on the transportation routes, a range of amenities and services, including healthcare. Their focus for this development is really around health and wellness and longevity of community. This project's delivered 850 new rental homes. It's a large project across 4 buildings, and it will be built out in 2 phases. And this project will be achieving being the largest social housing project delivered by a nonprofit in the city of Vancouver and potentially in BC. And we're also very excited about the creative financing strategy that we're pulling together for this project. It is early days, but we'd be happy to share more details about this later on as we get further down the road. And while there's a huge potential in the non-market housing sector, there's existing capacity and the resources to make these projects work. As I've said, creating financial viability for these projects is a challenge. We find some municipalities don't have dedicated teams for non-market or non-profit housing and treat projects the same as market projects. And this is challenging because while as a planner, I know municipalities need to cover the costs to fund infrastructure and growth impacts from large-scale development and growth. The biggest value and return is being able to deliver more non-market housing with fee waivers and policy leniency that enables more people across all of income levels to live in cities near their work and near the services that they need to thrive. Healthy cities require a diverse range of the workforce, and this is a key opportunity and a key lever that municipalities everywhere can pull to help achieve things. The next challenge is really around political changes. So there are some questions regarding, recent federal election, and there is always risk when changes in governments are on the horizon and what happens. For example, CMHC provides favorable interest rates and favorable amortization that significantly helps us achieve viability for our projects. And, leading up to the election, there was uncertainty if these programs would continue. Even with elected governments, it's still uncertain, what their priorities might be around bringing some of those programs in the house to delivering more non-markets for affordable housing. Government sites will continue to support the non-market nonprofit sector and delivering with the capacity that already exists, especially in BC. And then finally, construction cost increases and risk of tariff impacts continue to pose a risk to our ability to achieve viability. And this is, the same for the non-market sector and market sector and anyone who's managing development projects. So I look forward to tackling your questions at the end, but please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any other questions that we won't get to today, or if there's any specific projects or challenges you want to visit.
Great. Thank you, Annelise, much appreciated, and thank you for pivoting so quickly with the sound. And now on to our next speaker. We have Michael Mortensen with Liveable City Planning. Hi, Michael. Welcome.
Hello, thanks, Sophia.
Hello.
Sophie, thank you very much. I'll switch over to my presentation and share my screen.
Yeah, so we're gonna do something different with Michael. He's going to, as you see, share his screen and go from there.
Can you see it? Is it all good?
Yeah, it looks good to me.
Excellent. Thanks everybody for coming and thanks for hosting. It's a really important conversation, I think, in terms of the ongoing debate and challenges around affordable housing. And my introductory kind of statement is that I think as a discipline, planners need to be to bring better financial knowledge and skills to create sensible housing policies. I think we've got a challenge ahead of us, and I'll just outline it in my presentation. My key interests over the last quarter century working in Vancouver in affordable housing, in city planning. I used to work for CMHC in affordable housing, assisted housing for the city as a major projects planner, and then I crossed over to the other side to be a development planner. So I'm a sort of planner developer. All my life I've been interested in housing affordability, and I've become sort of, I think, focused on developing, kind of integrating plans, policies, and pro formas to get us housing choice and affordability. A big part of that is negotiating transactional planning arrangements between developers, nonprofit, and profit-oriented developers and cities, and along the way doing really great placemaking and creating livable cities. So in the last year, I've worked for the federal government from Halifax to Victoria, looking at the viability of rental housing. For the Squamish Nation, developing a master development plan for the nation to develop out its lands in metro. For the region, looking at the economics of development and parking for about half a dozen cities, and for a dozen or so private sector developers as well too. So doing a lot of work with BC Housing, with affordable housing. I sort of live on both sides of the market and non-market world. I'm by day a planner, by night I want to be a short track speed skater. I have a almost 3-year-old son and 2 overgrown children as well too. So I'm totally aware of what's going on in terms of affordability and the need for family-oriented housing. And I'm a bicycle nut as well too. So a little bit about me. Here are my truths. I just love this document from the CIP plan from Plan Canada on just what's going on in some of the planning debate and dialogue. We're getting a lot of misinformation around housing and policies. I think the truths are that transactional planning requires a lot of financial literacy, trying to arrange these trade-offs between greater intensity and what's the compelling public benefit. Where you find synergies where you integrate the policy, the plans, and the pro formas. One of my truths is that a lot of people I see out there in the world of planning critics and housing critics are innumerate and show up to the debate with no math. It drives me crazy. The general public, I think, on the whole, has very inflated ideas of what development profitability is for both, for sale strata properties and rental. In the public imagination, I think they see developers as enormous profiteers. So I'm here to sort of set that straight. Housing has always been financialized. It drives me crazy to hear people talk about the financialization of housing. Guess what? Housing has always been financed. It's always delivered returns for people investing in it. And you, all of us, are members of the BC Municipal Pension Plan. We are all invested. We're all members of the Canadian, the CPP, the Canadian Pension Plan. We're all investors in real estate, like it or not, know it or not. And so I'm really interested in learning a little bit about what you expect out of your investments. So if you have retirement money, we're going to do a little poll. And I just observed that our own municipal pension plans are very light on domestic purpose-built rental housing. And why is that? In the public imagination, rental housing, all these people are making tons of money, they're hand over fist. But why is it that our own pension funds are so lightly invested in Canadian domestic purpose-built rental housing? They're busy investing in other parts of the world. CPP invests 80% of its assets outside of Canada, I think. last time I checked. Other truths, rezoning and increasing intensity of the use of land reduces the cost of land. You hear a lot of people talking about all of the Broadway plan rezonings inflating the cost of land. Furthest thing from the truth. It's amortizing high land costs today under existing use over greater square footage new development. The other truth is that when we increase intensity, we bring land costs down, and we have the ability to then deliver all other types of amenities as part of this transactional plan. But you need to really understand the math. Developers are keenly interested in affordability. And it's become very challenging to deliver affordable ownership or rental housing in our region. In the last 20 years, median household income has only gone up 1.7 times in 20 years. Same period of time, development costs 3 times. Government fees 7-time increase. So all of us working in the public sector, federal, provincial, regional, and cities, take note. Nobody sees the separate fees that are charged on new housing. It's not like a restaurant where you see that here's what I ate, here's what I drank, here's the liquor tax, here's the sales tax, here's the GST. You don't see that. A lot of these are hidden. So my job today is to maybe unhide some of them. We can have an interesting debate and discussion. 4 levels of government with all just increasing regulation on housing. You hear it from developers, please stop all this change. Why do we have 3 vacancy taxes? I have a client with 92 strata units that they rented out since the beginning. They have to file 500 separate declarations for those 92 units every year. More than 500 pieces of paper for those units. It's crazy. And then again, I think we're hearing a lot about, let's tax developers. They're making so much money. And I think taxing for affordability is like bombing for peace. It's just, we're not going to tax our way to more affordable housing. I think the solution is to partner with industry to increase incentives, reduce sticks, but we need to know the math. So with that, and there's my thesis from 1997, University of British Columbia. My thesis has always been, let's increase the intensity of use of land, get vitamin D, vitamin density, but do it with good design, and also looking at amenity, affordability, and a sense of equity in the outcomes for our cities. So I'm really interested. I think I'm going to just stop sharing. We have a poll for you, and the poll is going to ask you, what do you expect as a minimum return for one of your own investments? So, or think of your pension plan. Is it 5% a year? If inflation is 3, and we're talking about, you probably want something that's, low to moderate risk. Each of you can pick one of these numbers. What are you looking for as an annual return? Pretend you have $1 million invested. Take a minute, select your outcome, and tell us what you want. Some people want 10, some people want 6. I do this every year with all my classes. I'm an adjunct at UBC in the Sauder School of Business, adjunct at the UBC School of Architecture and Landscape Architecture, and I teach at the SFU City program. I ask my kids this question every year, and I always get the same answer. It always clusters. Everyone's had a chance. Inflation's 3. What's the minimum return? We're going to end the poll. Okay, so what we see, I don't know how many responses we've got. Quite a few, actually. It's pretty good. Yeah, most clustering around 5, 6, 7% a year. Some people want more. They expect 9 or 10. I think maybe those of us who lived through the 80s and the double-digit inflation of the 80s, some people want more than 15. But generally speaking, 6 to 7. So I'm going to go back and reshare my screen. Window. Fantastic. A little bit of participation. There we go. Yeah. So, if you pick 5 or 6%, inflation is running 3. You start with $1 million at 6%. In about 10 years, you've made $343,000 towards, added to your initial investment. 6 and 7%. That's really interesting because in the public imagination, people think that developers are wildly profitable. This is what people think of when they think about development profits, but in reality, for condos for sale, we're talking about a 15 to 20% profit margin, return on cost. and it takes 5+ years to work your way through a development project. For rental housing, investors are targeting returns on equity invested between 6 to 10% annually. It's heavily regulated, long-term interest and operating cost risks. Both require 25% more equity at the developer's risk and liability for debt financing in the case of rental housing. So it's a long-term investment. Our pension funds demand around the same. There's our municipal pension plan from 2023, benchmark return for real estate, 7%. 1-year return, they lost money. There's a lot of risk with different classes of real estate. Residential, fairly stable everywhere. Everyone needs a place to live, but I think we have to be real about returns and real about the need for returns. You hear people, I see some of the questions, can't developers just readjust their expectations for profit? Doesn't work that way. A 15 to 20% margin on cost is a safety buffer in a very expensive business. A building is it's easy now to get $100 million building. You've got 25 million of your friends' money and your investment, investors' money, your family's money, your company's money at risk, plus 75% is debt. You're responsible for that too. And this is the return our pension funds are looking for. So when we point our finger at developers, there's 4 pointing back at us. This is what, why aren't our pension plans more invested in real estate in our markets? Financial innumeracy is a massive problem, I think. I see people showing up to the debate with no math skills. And I pointed, here's one example from Patrick Condon, drives me crazy because he knows about this. He says, here's how we can demand developers create, half these units at far below market prices. Well, I'll tell you what, he sets out an example, and this is a basic math in an Excel pro forma. What's the mortgage value? What's present value? The rate, 3% interest divided by 12 to get monthly. The number of periods, 20 years times 12. The payment is $19,800 a year, divide by 12. Future value is 0. This isn't a mortgage for 400. It's not financed for 450. It's financed for 297. It's so far off. And you look at this, and you also ignore efficiency. It's not a 600 square foot unit. It's a 690 square foot unit. You don't get to sell every square foot you build. You've got to give away 15% to hallways and elevators. The real value is not $750 a square foot. It's $431 that we're generating here. And, folks like this show up to the debate with broken math, in this case, sick math, but it's also a serial problem because Patrick just put out another book called Broken City, and I call it Broken Math. Same problem, just cannot calculate a mortgage. We need to show up to the debate with accurate information, reasonable financial numeracy. Turning to affordability, half the people in our region make less than $90,000 a year. This is a huge challenge for developers because it's getting so expensive to build. Here are the rents that a household can pay at 30% of income at the various income quartiles. So the first quartile goes up to about $50,000, and you can see rents in the range of $125 a month to $875 a month, and nowhere near any kind of mortgage ability. Really, it's not until you start getting into the sort of second and third quartiles where people can actually start to raise any kind of reasonable mortgage based on income. And part of that's because of the stress test. We add 2% to the interest rate to figure out how much you can qualify for in order to buy a home. If you can't afford to buy a home, you're going to be stuck in the rental market. And that's a problem for a lot of people today. So, cities everywhere are trying to figure out, okay, we work with government to create housing opportunities for people who live with very low income. We're talking about rents in the range of $1.25 a square foot, rents that are below $1,000 a month. And we see cities like Vancouver trying to do a market incentive program where they're basically internally subsidizing below market housing through, I guess, artificially higher market rents. But it's been reasonably successful. We've seen a lot of applications in the Broadway plan. These are the sort of rents that the below market tenants get. And these are the rents that are needed on the market side. But suffice to say, it's very tenuous given the economics of building, high development costs, and high city fees. So we get into that as we get going. If you want to buy a 1-bedroom unit, I looked around on Realtor.ca. The cheapest one I could find is $309,000 in the downtown West End, built in 1967, same vintage as me, 540 square foot, 1-bed, requires $80,000 of annual income, basically with a 4.4% interest rate, 2% stress test. If you want to buy a 2-bed, here's one in Burnaby for $529,000. It takes an income of $136,000 for a household, which is, again, 1.5 times median income. These are old. This is 1976. This thing was built. A 3-bed, Champlain Heights, 1979, family kind of size, 1,079 square feet, requires an income of $169,000, almost 2 times median income. Look at the other benchmarks from the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board. A benchmark apartment, $712,000. Not exactly sure what that apartment is in terms of size, but it requires $180,000 a year. A townhouse, $979,000, almost $250,000 a year. 3 times median income. A detached, this is where it gets insane. These are the existing land values that we have to contend with when we're looking at new development. A benchmark detached house in Metro, $1.8 million, almost 5 times median income in order to qualify for a mortgage with 10% down. This is an apartment that I bought in 2004 at Albernian Butte. As a city planner, I could qualify to purchase. It was $200,000. I think my income at the time was $59,000. Median at the time was 52, which is 1.1. The purchase price was, the income required was 1.1 times median. 20 years later, it's now 4 times as expensive. It's about $800,000 to purchase the exact same unit, same down payment, similar mortgage rates with the stress test, and it requires $216,000 of income to qualify. These are real financial challenges. This is the market. This isn't even new development. This is existing development. We made it work by flexing the apartments on the design side, making compact space work better. We need more flexibility on the development side. So I blew an opening through this bedroom wall, and that became living space during the day, and at night, closed off. But we make it work. So the future, I think, is going to be more compact. Interesting. Here's a condo I was a planner on in 2005 on Seymour Street. You might recognize it. The Elan. This was the pro forma from 2005. They were selling for $509 a square foot. I did a replica pro forma. If you were to build it today, to get it's the same return, 15.6% return on cost. You need to sell it for $1,720 a square foot. An average apartment, 725 square feet, $368 in 2005. Today, $1.2 million. What's changed? Well, the sales price has gone up 3.4. The income needed has gone up 3.5 times. Land has gone up, say, 2.7 times. Construction went from 175 to 574. It's up 3.3 times. Government fees, 7.2 times. Thank you, Metro, for a 10-fold increase in development cost charges on new units. Yes, toilets have to flush, taps have to flow, water has to be supplied for fire. But do we have to finance it on the next mortgage of the next person to buy a new house or rent a new place? There's got to be a better way. This is a huge, we've gone from 2.6 million to almost $20 million. Soft costs, 5 times increase. Overall, the project went from a $78 million project to a $250 million project. So it's 3 times as big, requires 3 times as much equity. If we want to go and look at 4 homes in the sort of Oak Ridge area, 49th and Oak, they're about 3.4 million dollars. If you put in a little premium to assemble them all, 20% premium. On a square foot basis, they're the most expensive forms of land in our region, single attached homes. Just going in, your land cost is over $500 a square foot. But we can take that lot, we can redevelop it at, say, 2.5 FSR, create some condos, bring the land cost down. So we've put in the land here. We've put in a CAC that the City of Vancouver typically charges in the Cambie corridor, $112 a square foot. Combined land's $254 a square foot. So when people tell you that rezoning increases the price of land, does it really on a dollar per square foot buildable basis? Absolutely not. We've gone from 525 to 250. But again, in terms of government fees, if you include GST, it's 20% of the development cost. Without GST, it's almost 15% of the development cost. When we think about CACs, property transfer tax, offsite improvements, DCCs, public art, water, metro water, sanitary, storm sewer, park, TransLink, almost 15% of the cost of our housing today. I'd also have a rental version of this. We go to 5.5 FSR. We do the Broadway plan type of 80% market rent, 20% below market. And we run these costs through because we've given breaks on DCCs for rental. The feds have waived GST for rental. It's 7.4% of the total development cost. But this is an art, I think, in my view, when we do these pro formas, to break out the market rental from the below market, and you can see how dilutive it is to demand a percentage of non-market as part of this project. This developer is actually losing almost $60 million on the below market, just on a capitalized basis. But that's a $141 million project. These returns don't make any sense. You need the financial literacy to actually bring it into a 10-year cash flow. I'm going to finance it at cost. I get $5.3 million of NOI. There's my gross rents, parking, operating expenses, capital replacement expenses, vacancy. I'm going to grow those over 10 years. And then I'm going to get a CMHC mortgage. And here's the really critical part. This is why this is so tenuous. Remember our pension funds? They want 7% return. Year one, we're getting 5%. That's the cash. After you pay the mortgage, you get $1 million left over. It's 2.3% of your $45 million of equity. If you get the principal repayment, add that back, your total return's 5%. You don't hit 10 until 10 years later. And you require the CMHC mortgage, 1.1 debt coverage ratio, 40-year amortization, qualifying interest at 4.25. By the time you do the takeout, we say maybe it's 1% lower, 3.25. And I'm going to grow rents and my operating expenses by 3%. If CMHC backs out and says we're not going to finance as much, we have to go to conventional financing. It says, look, we get a 30-year mortgage, and your qualifying interest rate is not 4.5%, it's 6%. Maybe your takeout's 5%. Look at what happens to our return. None of our pension plans would touch this. None of them would touch this. So what do we need to? Cities are slow to adapt to these changes. I think cities have a tendency to move fast to increase fees when the market is good. But I don't know. I've seen a couple of local city councils provided very hard evidence of a downturn in the development industry, and they're reluctant to reduce CACs and DCCs.
Excuse me, Michael. I was asked to let you know there's a 1 minute warning.
I love it. Okay.
Thank you.
So maybe we've got to actually look at these and readjust our expectations. So 90% market rents, 10% below markets. We can see the impact. But I think ultimately, as planners, I'm just going to wrap up. We really need to sharpen our financial knowledge and skills. Anyone creating planning policy at the federal, provincial, regional, or city level really needs to understand the economics of new rental and new condos. And that's where I'll wrap it up.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Michael. You created some controversy and a lot of good discussion, so I appreciate that. Okay, so now we're going to go on to our resident legal advisor, Alison Espetveidt with Lidstone and Company, who will say a few words. Alison?
Thanks, Sophie. So I wasn't asked to prepare a formal presentation, but rather maybe offer some legal perspectives on the presentation that's happened. So can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, yes,
okay.
You're
okay,
fine.
I'm getting a pop-up error, so I wasn't sure what that meant. So I think maybe the perspective that I can bring to all three of the presentations is that the reality for local governments is they're often being asked to do more with less. That seems to be true in all contexts, but it's particularly true when it comes to housing and delivering affordable housing for residents in the community. And so a lot of the conversations that we heard today focused on the challenges that the other side of the fence faces. And I wanted to maybe focus on some of the non-cost tools that may be available to local governments to help facilitate or streamline development approvals, because I think the reality is I have lots of conversations with clients all the time about how to pay for the things that need to be paid for. And the reality of those conversations, regardless of the source of the funding, there does need to be money. And as the federal government and the provincial government has reduced in different provinces, they're called different things. I'm used to calling it the Municipal Sustainability Initiative, but MSI grants used to pay for capital projects for municipalities in Alberta, and that money has all but disappeared. And so my clients are being asked to find sources to pay for all kinds of infrastructure, not just pipes in the ground, but rec centers, libraries. Depending on the jurisdiction, there could be some sharing of costs with school boards for fields or different types of joint use type arrangements. So we need to figure out where the money is coming from. And so Michael and Jay talked a lot about the difficulty in asking for the development industry to pay for those costs. I have worked with clients on rates for things like utilities, and I think that is sometimes missed in conversations about who's subsidizing who. I think because of the tools that are available when there is a development program or a development project coming forward, it can be convenient because ratepayers are voters to subsidize sort of the day-to-day or monthly, quarterly, or annual bills that ratepayers face when it comes to capital costs for infrastructure. But definitely, if you are doing financial feasibility analyses for any of these projects, it can be helpful to make sure that that financial feasibility analysis looks more comprehensively at a number of different sources of potential revenue. The other thing I wanted to quickly talk about is Annelise's presentation talked about fee waivers, and I think those are great tools to reduce the costs for not-for-profit housing. And I would just encourage all of my clients who are interested in those kinds of programs to make sure they're looking at their either fees and charges bylaws or development application bylaws, DCC bylaws, to make sure that the bylaws themselves allow for those kinds of discounts and waivers. I know sometimes the conversation is, that there should be like 100% discount for the affordable components of projects. That's true, but you can also be more nuanced in the approach to discounts and fees. You can waive them for certain parts of the project. You can discount them for projects that are meeting certain thresholds for affordability, that are maybe designing projects that are better aligned with your housing needs based on your housing needs report. One of the other bylaws or tools to look at that maybe isn't any skin or money out of the pocket of a municipality is the interest that municipalities are paying on security that it holds either in the context of land use permits or in the context of works and services. This is becoming an increasingly high conflict area for a number of my clients who, when interest rates were low, I think everyone, it was just dollar in, dollar out. But definitely I'm seeing increasingly aggressive requests for payment of interest on money that's being held by a municipality in pursuit of different approvals. The other thing I quickly wanted to talk about that I think sort of is relevant to all three of the presentations is just the concept of delay. Annelise talked about the ability to get expedited approvals off the ground. But I'm also seeing a bunch of projects that I've been working on for a number of years, where the conversation with the legal counsel on the other side is, that the project is sort of teetering on the brink of financial viability. And one of the challenges that they're facing is the carrying costs of the mortgages that Michael talked quite a bit about. So things like having template documents, really clear and streamlined processes to apply for or to have decisions made. Sometimes in the context of a development file, there may be discretion that needs to be exercised by staff. If there's a delegation bylaw, those kinds of things can be very effective when they are well drafted. And so if you are struggling sometimes to figure out what the lines and limits of sort of a staff person authorization or authority to make decisions in relation to some of these problems that pop up from time to time, I think you can help speed up decision making in relation to these projects if you have effective delegation set up. So that is the end of, I think, my 10 minutes. Am I correct, Sophie?
Yes, if
Do I
you're
have 5
done.
more minutes? No, I have 5 more minutes.
I think
but
we're
just
going to
wanted
give Ray a heart attack if you have
Yeah.
5 more minutes. Let's
Okay.
go, stay on, Alison, and we're going to go on to
Yeah.
our Q&A
Yeah.
portion now. And I would like to invite everyone else to turn on their cameras at this point. Thank you so much for the chat. I'm enjoying it. A lot of good points there, and please continue. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I will turn my camera on too. There we go. 1 second. Okay, so let's not waste any more time and go on to the first question. And this is just a question, general questions. What are the biggest barriers facing housing developers that local governments could help address? And what are the main tools that local governments can use to improve development economics? I know everyone's touched on this. Maybe Jay, do you want to begin?
Approvals processes in many cases take longer than they need to and should be sped up. Local governments can find creative ways to reduce construction cost, reduce parking standards, for example. But I always have to remind people, reducing cost of construction doesn't necessarily mean bringing down price. Developers are going to charge what the market will bear. They're not going to say, oh, I saved $50 on the parking, so I'll drop 50% off the price. So reducing costs and fees are important. Back to the graph I showed you about residual land analysis. The key is to make sure developers can compete land away from what it's doing today, like being a crappy little strip mall or single detached houses. They have to be able to outbid to buy the site, and that means helping make the pro forma work, to Michael's point.
Thank you. Michael, you're nodding.
Yeah,
I'll jump in.
Yeah, properly zoned land. I think, we developers on both public sector and private sector developers have been forced to jump through rezoning hoops that take 2+ years. Because I think the only way that cities have been able to get, to get a taking of the new land value is through this protracted CAC process. So there's been a natural disincentive to have properly zoned land. I can tell you a story about an applicant that goes into the director of planning's office with a suitcase with $500 million of equity. They say they want to build 2,000 below market homes. What can you do for me? And the outcome was a 5-year planning process in the middle of a dumpster fire housing crisis. 5 years to get a rezoning done. I won't say who, I won't say where, but these have massive consequences for all of us, for affordable housing. On Jay's point about costs, yes, reduce costs, and it makes projects that much more viable. There is a concept in appraisals called comparables. So yeah, if you have a unit that has no parking and a unit that has parking, there's going to be a market adjustment for that in price. If you're going to buy it, there's going to be market adjustment in rents. So there is a natural market-based system for adjusting these things. It's not just that, you can still collect the same value if it has a parking stall or not. I think that's in the minds of a lot of decision makers when we're thinking about how car parking ratios, for example. Developers going to run away with the profit. Well, not really. The market works.
Okay, thank you. Annelise, Alison, would you like to jump in, or you're good?
I mean, I think I covered most of them.
Yeah. Okay. There's a little bit of feedback, so maybe if you're not speaking, you could turn your microphone. Yeah. Okay. Is it time for for-profit developers to rethink their desirable economic return and recognize their role in driving housing affordability? I don't know how practical that is. Please let me know.
It's not how
No.
it works. Development is not a
Yeah.
hobby. Development is a business activity that involves considerable risk, and there's all kinds of reasons why there needs to be a minimum level of profitability, not the least of which is to convince lenders and investors to play in your project. So
Yeah.
no, it's not how it works.
What Jay said, and
Yeah.
again, the one finger out, there's four fingers back. Are we all prepared to accept a 1% return for our pension plan investment? Because it's going to deliver more affordable housing. No, none of you is going to invest $1 million and get a 2% return or a 1% return. Nobody.
Yes. Understood. I guess this is a question for Alison. Should performas be made available to the public in rezoning public hearings? Is that ethical to require that, or legal?
I was going to say, I'm going to stay away from the ethics of it, but I will
Okay.
talk about the legality of it,
Okay.
because I have had more than a few legal files where this particular issue has come up. And there's no statutory basis to be asking for that type of information. And I have gotten a lot of pushback when my clients are asking for it. This was more back in the days of negotiating CACs. And what I would like to emphasize in answering this question is that all of the rules, which I'm sure are driving a lot of municipalities insane, because it's a lot of work to create bylaws and to draft consistent and standard rules all across all of your development projects. But the reason the province has emphasized and focused on having clear parameters around what is asked for and what is required to be provided for certain types of projects is because it allows for transparency. And in the olden days, and still currently for clients who are negotiating CACs, they are often asking for these pro formas to know how much money that they can ask for. And I think Michael's presentation probably emphasized the lack of financial literacy in relation to those kinds of pro formas. I don't always recommend that my clients have access to that, or not my clients, but counsel of my clients have access to that information, because it's not always clear what counsel is going to do with that information. There are issues with confidentiality. Even if that information is shared on a confidential basis, it creates corresponding legal challenges. But I'm not always confident that the people reading those kinds of documents understand what variables are part of those calculations. And so should they? Probably not. Can they? Also, definitely not. So on both ends.
I'd like to offer a different perspective.
Yeah.
You can't force a developer to share a developer's pro forma, and I'm not sure there'd be any value to it, because developers can produce pro formas. I mean, there's a lot of flex in the numbers. You can produce a pro forma to show what you want to show. But I think to the extent that an inclusionary zoning bylaw is based on math that shows how much affordable housing a project can afford to include, or a density bonus bylaw that includes math about how much amenity or affordable housing can be included, that math is part of the public record. It's not the developer's math, it's the local government's math, hopefully informed by some credible analysis. But I don't believe you can go to a community and say, we should chuck a whole bunch of density at this project because we don't want to show you the numbers, but you should give it. Trust us. Or we can only get 20 daycare spaces, not 40 because of the math. We don't want to show you the math, trust us. I don't think that's right. I think full disclosure is okay, but don't expect the developer to do it. That's local government's job.
Okay.
I'd jump in and just say, yeah, I think there's a role, I think, for the industry and for government to share more, even through generic financial analysis. CMHC has done a lot of great work in this as well too, along with just a bunch of other objective third-party appraisers, to really have a sort of a current thermometer on the viability of rental, the viability of condominiums. Like, I think there is a role there where the industry and government can collaborate more.
And I feel like you don't want to push the developer into having two pro formas, a public one and a private one, right? Because that
They
can
do.
easily.
They will.
Well, we
And
don't
the
want.
third one, they'll show the bank. It's
Yeah. Okay. 5, we've addressed. 6, how should we better value the preservation of existing affordable rental housing instead of sacrificing it for new housing? Good question. And this was a key issue in the recent City of Vancouver by-election, where hundreds, thousands came out in droves to vote. I
want to put the fox in the hen house on this one. You need to understand that an awful lot of existing affordable rental housing is very old wood frame buildings that don't have sprinklers, in many cases don't have elevators, so they're not accessible, and in many cases have not been at all seismically upgraded, and in many cases are built at extremely low densities relative to modern requirements and standards, including in locations that have billions of dollars invested in transit. My own view is you don't preserve this housing, you replace it. You replace it in new projects where you insist that at least the same number of new units are provided at rents that are consistent with what they used to be, as long as you can make the numbers work. But I think long run, that's a much better solution than trying to turn a 3-story 1.1 FSR walk-up into a museum piece.
Yeah, I agree with Jay, and I think also those units aren't necessarily affordable. They get re-tenanted at extremely high rents. Whereas when you do a new building, and you secure them, then you're going to get secured rentals at whatever the agreed rate is for the long term. Add to that the fact that I think if you keep an eye, for example, on the Broadway plan, the numbers are going to come out, and you're going to see that for every one unit replaced, there's a multiple of new below market units secured that are going to be created. So, the proof's in the pudding. The applications are moving forward, the rezonings are moving forward. Reputable developers are moving forward to develop, new towers, new buildings with good design. I think it'll be still leafy streets. Everything will be okay. Everything's going to be all right.
Okay.
Maybe I could
Annelise,
add a last comment as well. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I understand why there's that discussion around making existing affordable rental. For example, like with a nonprofit owning existing affordable rental housing, there is the thresholds that they reach with, Jay's comments on, labor stock that maybe wasn't necessarily also built up to code or super well. And there is a threshold by nonprofits who, are maintaining low affordable rents in these buildings can only save so much for capital repairs and replacement of the existing building. And at a certain point, that kind of combined with the potential of increased density on the site, really just leads to decisions around redeveloping and creating more homes on that site, given that density allows, and also taking more of that requirement where there's significant capital cost investments into those stock buildings. That's often what we see from clients. They're at that point when they come to us and saying, how do we take advantage of the potential context, and knowing that this is a kind of challenge in this we're facing in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Annelise. Again, if anyone has any comments, just please jump in. Our next question: Have has there been any evidence to date that proactive planning and the new legislation have actually improved the viability of housing projects? I wish we had a municipal planner representative here, one or two, to talk about, has there been any change in their community, given all the investment going in, all the changes? Who would like, how about Michael first? Why don't we go to Michael first on this one? You have to turn your microphone on, Michael.
I'm myself. Yeah, I mean, I think when we're looking at, for example, Broadway plan, just the volume of new applications coming through, part of that's linked to some of the TOD, but it's really the city's initiative for increased height and density. No, it is. I have clients that were going to do a townhouse development that are now doing putting together a 6-story application. So ultimately, it is going to have positive impacts.
Jay?
Well, I think in part the jury is out. Keep in mind that most of these changes are either extremely recent or don't even kick in until December of this year. So I mean, it's hard to point to any of it and say it's a bad idea to make municipalities do proactive planning. You can't say it's a bad idea to encourage more comprehensive zoning instead of everything being a site-by-site rezoning. I mean, ultimately, the real question is, will we get more housing and more affordable housing than we otherwise would have? And it's going to take a few years to figure that out. I think something that sometimes gets missed is just the raw capacity of the development industry to produce units. It's true sometimes that we all find examples where the drips aren't coming out the pipe fast enough. But at the same time, if you drive around Vancouver today, you'll be blown away at how many projects are under construction. And sometimes I wonder just how many framers and concrete formers there are out there and what's the total capacity to deliver new product any quicker than we're doing now.
Thank you. We will invite everybody back in a year's time and we will talk about it all again. Are municipal fees and charges a relic from the good boom times, but are now significant drags on all types of housing?
Oh yeah. I don't know how some municipalities can ask for 20%, 10% below market housing and an amenity cost charge. Like, folks, you know what? The music is over. The rising market saves everybody. Days are gone. I have a client whose land is going in at $60 a square foot. The municipal fees are more than that. I think governments at all levels need to step back and have a second look at what they're doing to our housing costs. And consumers need to demand a detailed bill. It's like you go to a restaurant and they just put a 20% tip on it and say, sign this. You need to know what you're paying for as customers, as renters, and as condo buyers. I think we need a breakout of fees. They have grown so much, more than anything.
I invite
That's true, but on the other hand, you got to have enough water in the pipe for fire flow.
No
and
doubt.
In a modern community, a library is not regarded as a luxury, and childcare spaces are essential. And if you're in the region and you don't like the DCCs, TransLink has a huge capital budget that's got to be paid. The water district's got a huge capital budget, the sewage and drainage district. This stuff has to be paid for. Maybe you can strip out some of it and say, we don't need quite so much of brackets, put your favorite amenity in here, close brackets. But to the extent that we get to a list of essential infrastructure and amenity, somebody got to pay for it. And if you don't like the idea of the development industry paying for it because the costs become too large and impair project viability, I get that. But then you got to say, who do we point to next?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's not coming out of the development process, it's coming out of somebody else's wallet, and that's going to mean higher property taxes. I mean, good luck convincing communities to accept growth if it turns out it costs them another $2,000 a year in property taxes to pay for essential infrastructure. Or if the feds are going to step in and incentivize the municipalities that reduce their charges, the feds are going to get that money from somewhere. Maybe they're going to drive up the deficit and push it out 50 years to our grandchildren. I don't know. But sooner or later, somebody got to pay that piper, and that's going to mean tax. So pick your poison.
Good point.
I think we can be a lot more creative around reuse, adaptation of existing amenities. I think we just have to be smarter. We can't pretend we can just add it to the bill. I'm sorry, like the menu's closed. I think we have to really be judicious because it is impacting affordability. When oh my gosh, when working professionals can't afford a condo in Greater Vancouver, it's not going to be good for anybody. Those teachers are going to go live somewhere else. The doctors are going to live somewhere else. The lawyer, everyone's going to live somewhere else.
Yeah, Michael, I think that's already starting to happen. The market currently favors market rental housing. Do you foresee a pathway for home ownership for young households, especially in the pricier urban markets like Vancouver? That's a good point, because we are doing a lot to encourage market rental housing.
I would love to.
Yeah, Annelise?
Yeah, something affordable. I've heard this question before on affordable home ownership and what the likelihood of that being an active part of our housing spectrum is anytime soon. And there are occasional cases and case studies of this happening. But to be honest, from the non-market development perspective, like the projects go where there is financing that works to achieve the viability for your project. So there has not been a significant focus or commitment from the government on providing opportunities for homeownership structures that are creative and work with accessibility to the same extent that it's been prioritized for rental. And so from our perspective, working in the market sector, there aren't those options currently to secure some kind of creative structure to make for the homeownership work. And infrastructure that takes a lot of work. And so it's just work with most organizations, nonprofits, and groups that are in the partnership to pursue that, when it would cost them a lot of money just to figure out what support and support.
Jay, did you want to add anything to that?
I'll just add this. Making affordable rental housing is the most affordable thing you can do, even though it doesn't help people get on the pathway to home ownership. But it has the great advantage of knowing where the benefits go. Renters enjoy those benefits in the short term, and then when they leave, somebody else enjoys the benefits of the discounted rent. When you start creating mechanisms to create affordable home ownership, it raises a whole bunch of interesting questions about who's entitled to growth in value, how you manage that, do you recover growth in value? I mean, it's a much more complicated piece of policy to implement in a way that doesn't end up just accidentally creating windfalls for the ones who win the first lottery.
Yeah, I think the same problem applies for, say, Broadway plan below market rentals. Who gets the lottery? There's no income testing. There's no means testing. You could earn $1 million a year and get a below market unit in perpetuity. It's like a New York rental, the discounted New York rents. I think on the condo side, I talked to Heather Tremaine from Options for Homes. She used to be with Options for Homes in Toronto, and they did a silent second mortgage shared equity ownership program, which I think has a lot of legs in, say, Greater Vancouver. But I think just generally speaking, planners in the room can do a lot to increase the affordability of homes for purchase by, I think everywhere, we need to be more flexible with design, allow some shared light, shared ventilation inboard bedrooms as primary or secondary type of bedrooms, or tertiary bedrooms, where you can take a 2-bed, stretch it to a 3, a 1-bed, stretch it to a 2, because it's going to save 20% of the floor area by doing that. And it's really going to be a compact future. So we have to, I think, on the developer side, I think my development community needs to be way more creative about how they're planning out units so that they're more flexible. Because the reality is we're going to be more European. Europe has its cafes. America has its bathrooms. What America needs is more espresso and less plumbing. That was Doug Kellback from the Pedestrian Pocketbook from like 1991. We need more espresso, less plumbing, more flexible apartments. But your planning rules at the municipal level are frustrating that. We need a little more flexibility.
we need a separate panel made up of representatives from local government throughout British Columbia to sort of respond. I think that would be a good future webinar. Maybe the final question, looking at our time. So what could smaller communities outside of major urban areas in BC how can they best attract the housing developers to deliver a broader spectrum of housing?
I can probably weigh in on that because those are primarily my clients, sort of the small to medium sized
Okay,
clients.
Alison?
Yeah, and I think that one of the challenges that they face is just lack of capacity in terms of municipal staff. And so I'm hoping that some of this proactive planning that they're being forced to do may be part of the puzzle piece for them, where they are not, there's just a higher sense of investment by the public and council in what the community looks like, and that community reflects the values of the general public rather than new development or new people coming into the communities. And so hopefully those tools are going to be available to staff to move applications quicker through the process. And the other thing that I'm finding is sometimes there is not enough plain language documents for people who are not like sophisticated or experienced developers. And so rather than have long sort of subdivision and development servicing bylaws, for example, with a lot of detail about what the standards are for development, it can be helpful to have drawings. It can be helpful to have sort of little one-page like policy type statements that are maybe more legible for people who are not, maybe not using lawyers regularly, or maybe are just smaller in the scope of their operations.
Great, thank you. That's good advice. Okay, I think we're going to call it a webinar. It's been an amazing discussion. Thank you all, and thank you to everyone who participated in the chat window. I am going to actually print the chat out and email it to everybody along with the link to the presentations and the recording. I think people will find that very interesting. So I would like to thank again all our speakers, Jay Wollenberg, Annelise Veen, Michael Mortensen, and Alison Espetveidt for their presentations. A few housekeeping items. Again, a reminder, a link to the recording and the slides will be posted on our website shortly. If you are a PIBC member, please record your 1.5 CPL credits for watching this webinar. And I have good news for Jay and Michael. If you presented today, you get 3 CPL credits. Yay. And now I'm just going to talk about something a little different, but still very significant. PIBC is excited to deliver a very special webinar on May 21st about professional governance and the potential implications for how the planning profession in British Columbia could be regulated to protect the public interests. We have a solid slate of presenters: the Provincial Office of the Superintendent of Professional Governance, Forest Professionals of BC, and the BC Society of Landscape Architects will be sharing their perspectives about professional governance. In addition, PIBC will provide an update on the professional governance research and engagement project that we're working on. And registration will open next Monday and will be free of charge for everyone. So thank you again to our presenters. It was an awesome presentation, as you can see by all the comments that we received in the chat. And I will say bye for now.
Ciao, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.